Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. And I'm here seeing you once again with the course of Business English Lecture 2. Today's course is going to be fun again. We are going to learn more about communicative competence, business communication to be specific. We will include our language exercise, language expansion activity of listening as well. So let's move on with today's talk. What are we going to talk about today? We will try to discuss the basics of leadership communication. When we talk about business, we talk about leadership. So in the previous lecture, we talked about communication skills, basics of communication, and then now we are going to build on to that by discussing what are the basics of leadership communication. You are a business person, you are to lead, you are to command. Okay. Then we will talk about communicative skills. After all these steps of discussion, we will collaborate our talk into what does it mean by business English and being an effective communicator of business English. Nature, process, and parameters. Communication model and agencies. Whether it is one way, it is two way, or it is both of these together. Keys to effective written communication as well. However, this is a kind of quite long discussion. We may have to chop it down into two parts and move a bit of it into the third lecture. So let's start with today's talk. Let's see how we are able to move on with that. But like always, we will have our language expansion activity, practical language, business English, and practical listening skills, practice too. Moving on, let's start with basics of leadership communication. George Bernard Shaw said, and I quote, "The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion it has taken place." Well, it's not only in communication, it is very much present there in business communication too. Whenever, at times it happens that we understand some idea in such a way, it sinks in, it is inside us in such a way that we take it for granted. When we take something for granted, whether it's an idea or anything else, we at times unconsciously keep a part of it unattended. How? Maybe, I give you an example. A very bright student who knows everything about his or her subject, very well prepared for the examination, who has taken all the classes, who has prepared well, studied well, has been a regular student all the year. Now at the end of the term, he's appearing for his or her his test. What happens? He goes to examination center and question paper comes in. He reads the question paper. I know this question. I know all the answers. And he gets super excited. Now when it's time to write, he says, well, it's a very easy question, it's a very easy answer, and he writes it. However, when the result comes in, he's expecting 99% marks and he gets 75%. Well, as a matter of fact, 75% is a good percentage, but somebody who is expecting 99% to 100%, for him it's going to be a shock. 75%? Why? And the boy starts making noise. Why? There has been some cheating, there has been some unfair marking, there has been some favoritism. No, I want my paper rechecked. And when the paper is rechecked, again, it's 75%. You know why? The reason is, when you're answering a question that you are very well prepared, you answer the things that you think, you do not answer the things that you think are very commonly understood by you and as well as the reader. So half of the things are there in your head. You assume that since you know them, the reader know them too, so there is no point writing. And half of the things you write on the paper. Now, you are right. Readers, they know it. They may know it. But you need to put them down on the paper in black and white if it's a requirement. Because when the teacher is marking you, teacher is not marking you on what you have in your head, what concepts you have. Teacher is marking you there on what you write on the paper. So, no matter if she totally understands how brilliant student you are, how wonderful concepts you keep, she will have to mark you for whatever you have produced on the paper. That is taking one idea for granted, and you are not producing it when it's time, it's need of producing it. And that is what happens, that in relationships even, I need to tell my sister that I love her. You know, it's obvious that a sister loves her sister, and she loves her very much, and she tends to be her best friend in the world. But at times we forget telling this to other person that we really do, that I really love you. Like if I feel love for my sister, but I don't tell her, or I don't tell her completely, I don't give her some clear gestures, she would not know that I really do. She may assume that I do, but she will never get confirmed about it. So it's half communicated feeling, ambiguous feeling. So she will never have that satisfaction what she would have in other situation when I clearly tell her, I love you, see, my sister, I love you. And I buy her gifts, and I buy her, you know, I give her a phone call, and showing gestures practically, out of abstraction. That is what, now bringing this information into a business environment when you are dealing with, customers. Well, if you are sitting at a customer support center, and you're dealing with for example, you are dealing with a problem of a mobile phone that has to be connected with internet services, and a customer calls you, hello, see, my internet service is not working. And you say, oh no, it should be working because it's set on our end. No. How do you start? You always have your greetings. You always tell them your name. They may not ask you, but this is what you need to do to complete the process, because what if while talking the talker on the other end feels like taking your name and like, see what happens. See, I told you my internet service is not working, and then the other person responds and blah 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 blah, and you say, okay, yeah, what is your name? What did you tell me? So if you did not tell your name, that will make him ask this question. However, if right in the beginning you say, Assalamu alaikum, my name is Hamid Mansoor, how may I help you? Or, yes, I understand that your internet is not working and that is the problem we are going to deal with. And then you go on. And the next time, when the caller is talking to you, he needs to take your name. He knows that what name he has to take. So it's a very tiny thing that you may ignore just like that. But when it comes to business, it has a meaning. It has a place. It is worth doing, because you are making one process complete and ensuring its success. So most of the time, the problems that senders or receivers face is because of the reason that one of the participants, he or she assumes that the process has been completed, though it's not. So I hope you get my point. Never ever assume things. Prepare, plan, design and execute. And don't take information, things or people for granted. Try to confirm your assumptions, because decisions made on assumptions are not really trustworthy. To make informed decisions, you need to be informed first. And information does not rely on assumptions. It has to have some homework and research work done. Okay, so starting with this tip of the day, we move on. Lack of sending and receiving directions. And you see what is happening on the screen? You are being pointed out. And that is why we left on 3. Right? You see, in situations like medical, if you keep assuming things without getting them confirmed and cleared, you may cause a life to be dead. Your assumption may cost a life. You get my point? So, that is why it is clearly given in business. Most of the times, there are many things at stake. Your time, your money, your reputation, your business, and so on and so forth. So, assuming may not be very trustworthy channel to make decisions all the time. Though at times, sometimes you have to consider your assumptions to predict. However, don't make it a habit. A process by which information and understanding are transferred between a sender and receiver is communication process that we have discussed. Now, we need to discuss what are the goals of communication. Well, one can say that a goal can be to change behavior, to get action, to ensure understanding, to persuade, to get and give information. Now, if you look at this change of behavior, you can see that basically it's connected with all of these categories. What type of change this can be? Change can be of any type, positive as well as negative, progressive, moving on, moving back, moving forward, moving backwards, so any type of change. Making somebody doing some action is one type of change. Making somebody understand something is another type of change. And maybe somebody already understands it, but ensuring that he or she understands the way you want is change. Persuading. What do you mean by persuade? Persuade is to motivating somebody to do something, to take an action, to go for an action, convincing somebody. So persuasion is a change in behavior. Then, to get and give information. When you get information, there is a change. When you give information, you cause a change. So basically, goal of communication is causing some kind of change. Now this change can be of these four basic categories. Though they can be many in number, but these are the 4 basic categories we are going to talk about. Okay. Now, a basic model of the communication process. In the previous lecture, we have talked about the very basic model of communication process. In fact, we talked about the stakeholders, different participants involved, potential participants involved in the process of communication. Today we are going to talk about what is this model of communication? How does it take place? What is this process about? So look at that. We talked about leader encodes message because we're talking about leadership in communication. We talked about receiver decodes message. Then we have the channel, the carrier, potential noise and distortion. And then we have return message encoded and sent, feedback loop. So the complete process is a circular process where the information travels from one end to another. And because it's not always happens that I send a message and it's received and communication ends there. No. An ongoing communication is always circular in motion. I send a message, you receive, you send message. So it's a very quick process that takes place. Now, look at these two things. The sender, who is a leader this time, and his a decision of encoding message. Now, there is this fifth thing that we understand is basically message. So, first of all, we need to understand what the message is, and we have to talk about and think about and decide about all those things related to message that we discussed in the first lecture. The value of the message, the nature of the message, the formal and informal, the audience who is going to get message. And once we are clear about this aspect, then we talk about the process. Okay, so the leader will encode message, will use some kind of language. If the message encoding is done, okay, then you are done with this point. If you are an effective user of, language, you are efficient, you know how to use the language to encode a message, appropriate vocabulary, appropriate sentence structure, your language, your tone, the kind of whether it's going to be formal or informal, and whether it's going to be verbal or non-verbal, whether you're going to use some technology or you're going to use visuals or graphics. So all these decisions are going to help you to encode your message. Once the message is encoded, you will then talk about the channel, the carrier that you are going to use. Sometimes this is technology assisted, sometimes it is very direct, sometimes it is paper, sometimes it is air. So if it is, here we are talking about the atmosphere, the life situations where you are there, the sender is there and the receiver is there. However, though it's a very direct kind of channel that is normally used in the communication process, the most basic form of the channel, but still there are problems. We can understand that problems can be there with technology. We can understand that the problems can be there with when using phone, the voice is not good and blah 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 blah. But even at times, these problems are there when it's face-to-face communication. Why? Your noise is not, you have lots of noise around. There are many people talking, so you may not get your message across. What you are saying is not understood. Or you may have, you may have to shout. When you shout, your message changes the meaning, because the tone that you decided, the format that you decided, if it's a polite tone and you have a formal, you want to use it formally. If you are shouting, unconsciously your pattern will change. When you are shouting, it may not be polite anymore. When you're shouting, it may not be formal anymore. So you unwantedly, at the spur of the moment, your decision will change. But that's how it is. It's the channel, problem with the channel. Then distortions. If you're talking on phone, if the line gets disturbed again and again, or there are different kinds of distortion. If you are talking face to face, people crossing in between, this is a kind of barrier. So all these barriers cause troubles. And how do you know that they are causing troubles? Because if I'm sending a message, how do I know that my message is crossed or not? My message reached you or not? For that, here comes the fourth thing, the feedback loop. The feedback tells me that whether my message is across or not. So unfortunately, if at any point I am not able to control the barriers, I cannot solve the problems, the feedback gives me an opportunity to clarify later on. Now, how it happens? For that, you have to be trained enough to receive the feedback, to understand it, and quickly take an action to solve the problem. For example, I'm on phone, I'm a customer support service, and I'm talking. And I understand, I say, hello, you please need to switch off your mobile once, take the battery out, and put it again and switch on. I hope your problem will be solved. And the other person, hello, excuse me, I don't get you. There's noise, there is distortion. Can you say it again? Can you say it again? So when the person tells you that, hey, this is the problem, you quickly get it. And you say, all right, madam, I'm going to tell you again, but at the same time, I have your number with me. I'm going to message you the instructions. So what you are doing, you have got the training how to minimize this problem and how to solve problems related to these issues. So you instantly give her the solution. I'm going to text you to authenticate the process of communication that your message is conveyed. That is successful communication. Now, second example. Hello, I want to book a seat for to fly to Canada. Can you please book a seat for me? Oh yes, madam, I can book a seat for you. All right, please. And the person is telling the customer, can you please note down your PNR? PNR is a number that the person uses when he or she books your seat. And he says, your PNR is PTBB, right? And I say, you say, what? What is it? And he say, parrot, table, pot, and ball. And then you get it. Parrot, table, pot, and ball is better to understand than PTBB, because these are closely related sounds. So the listener may not get whether you are saying P or you are saying T or you are saying B. However, when you articulate a complete word, it clarifies that this is the letter you're referring to. So, however, for these things, you need to be trained. You need to assume that these are the problems that can come out of these and these issues. So having information about the field that you are going to be in basically enables you, trains you to think about the problems and solution in advance that you are going to face. So you definitely would understand what do I mean by this model of communication process. So it basically informs you about the corners, all the corners that you are going to explore in order to ensure that you are going to be an effective, successful communicator. Moving on. Now, we have talked about a few barriers. There are several barriers. All these aspects that I've talked about, all these participants of this process of communication, they can have problems, they can have barriers. Let's talk about a few barriers that we can include our today's talk. One barrier is noise, inappropriate medium, assumptions, misconceptions. Now, let me give you an example about misconception. Okay, teacher is teaching and her class finishes at 1:30, and at 1:28 she says, close your book. So in the very first go, students may get it as close your book, class is over. However, teacher forgot telling, close your book, I'm going to quickly take a quiz of 2 minutes. And then soon after she says close the book, she says, okay, what is the name of this object that we just talked about? And students are wondering, what is happening? That means teacher assumed that she's going to ask about the object and students will understand it. No, she has to make it very clear. Close your book, students. You are going to have a 2 minutes quick quiz. So this assumption has to be clearly communicated to have better results, because in the other case, if I say close your book, some students are so energetic, they get so excited and happy when it's time to leave the class. They say close the book, put it in the bag, zoom out of the classroom. So to avoid such situation, the teacher needs to clear it in the very first instance what she wants. Emotions. Well, that's one very obvious barrier that we normally feel when we are dealing into relations. You say something and the other person takes it in some other way, and then you are following it. No, I did not mean it. I did not say it. Sometimes, very common things, like two friends are talking and the third friend says something and says, shut up. And she took it on her heart. And she said, you called me to shut my mouth. And you say, no, I meant to say, shut up for now. Like, stay for now, let me finish my talk with her. And she said, no. And then she stops talking to you and then you keep on calling her. See, I did not mean that. And the other friend might be in some other kind of frame of mind. And at that time, she should not be given that loud some unfriendly gesture, but she is given because I did not know that she's not in a good frame of mind. So her emotional reception is unknown to me. So at times, both participants are right, but since they have different emotional frameworks working behind, the message that is crossed is miscommunicated, is misconceived, is misunderstood. Okay, I hope that this thing is clear with you now. Language differences. Well, my. This is one very serious thing. Well, recently I have been working with some Arabic students, and they were basic level students. And one day I was invigilating a basic level students group of students, and a girl was sitting. It was exam going on, and there is one student sitting second and third, and this second one is little out of the row. I wanted to make her inside, so to minimize the chances of cheating, and then it may cause me problem when I'm walking in between rows. So I went at the back of that student, and I minimizing my voice sound, not to disturb other students. I asked her, can you please get up so I get you in line? And she looked at me and kept writing. I said, will you please get up so I can get you inside? She looked at me, she kept writing. And you trust me, I said this for maybe 4 to 5 times, and she kept writing. And I got upset. I did not know that they were basic level students. I was invigilating them for one day. And I got a bit like, maybe this student has a problem in hearing, or what can this be? And then for the 6th time, maybe 5th or 6th, I asked her again. And this time I said, can you please get up so I get you inside the row? Here you are. And she got me. And then I figured out, no, it's not hearing problem, it's the difference of language. She does not understand English very well. And then later on when I investigated, I got to know that this group of students is basic learners who are not efficient in taking instructions. So, language plays very important role in communication. And it's not clear language only. Well, even two people who are of the same language, if they are not on the same level of understanding, if they do not even share the same background, at times the message is not clear. Well, for example, if there are two friends talking to each other, one has background of English literature and the other one has background of finance, and he's not very much into literature and reading English and reading books. And one friends tell the other person, see, I have to make a decision and I'm worried these days to be or not to be. Now, if you know what it means by to be or not to be, you will really understand the conflict the person is going through. To be and not to be is a reference from Shakespearean drama, Hamlet, where Hamlet's conflict, the major dilemma he goes through in the story is he does not know to do or not to do. And all of his problems are basically related to this to be or not to be thing. But the finance guy says, well, you can do it this way, blah, 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 and here you go. However, what is missing? Missing is that understanding that person A from English background is trying to communicate to person B, but person B is not getting. The fault is not with the people. The fault is not with the message. The fault is with the background that they share, the language background. This is pure language. This is language plus literature. You get the point? So, there are many types of problems that are related with language differences. So, culture difference is another important aspect. Well, you see, something that is taken very casually in one culture can be taken something very seriously in another culture. For example, in our culture, it's not a bad thing that men and women, they are sitting together and talking. However, in Islamic culture, and you know what I mean to say, in Western culture, they do not mind men and women sitting together, having gatherings and talking to each other. However, in some other countries, countries that would try to perform religion religiously, they may mind having men and women combined gathering. So, any type of culture that is different from other culture may cause an issue when you are dealing in multicultural community. Poor listening skills, definitely. If everything is perfect, going fine, but you do not have good listening skills, will cause into failure of communication. Use of jargons, you see, use of diction, use of language. Now, if I say use of diction and you do not know what diction means, you won't be able to get the message. So I said use of diction, use of language. That means I made it simple for you after using one jargon. Jargon is one typical word from that profession that explains the understanding. Diction means the appropriate language for one, appropriate terminology for one concept. So that simplifies my idea. Instead of saying having appropriate language, I used one word, use of diction. However, if my listener is not aware of the word, he or she will get confused. So there are ways to overcome this problem by simplifying, using your jargon for once, simplifying in the following sentence, and then you can use the jargon again and again in your in the following talk, because you understand that you have made your listeners understood the concept. Directions. If your directions are not clear, communication can be a failure. You need to switch off your mobile and refresh the SIM. What do I mean by that? I mean refresh the SIM. The listener may be confused. What do I mean by refresh the SIM? Do I need to wash it? Or do I need to do it? Well, if I say, please switch off your mobile, take the battery out, take the SIM out, and then insert the battery after 2 seconds, and then insert the SIM again and switch on your mobile. You have refreshed your SIM, you've refreshed your battery, and you are ready to use again. So I made it clear. What do I mean by refreshing your SIM is to taking it out along with the battery and inserting it after this pause of 2 seconds or maybe a minute. That is what I meant by that. So giving clear direction again is a step ahead in making your communication easy to follow. Moving on, the leader as communication champion. Well, yes, a leader has to be communication champion who is well informed of all these expected potential issues. Now, a leader as communication champion is how he knows what are the problems, internal problems dealing with the message and the process, and all the forces affecting the message and the process. He knows strategic conversation. He knows how to strategies to deal with the problem. Like whenever I'm discussing a problem with you, I'm trying to give you solutions for it. So he is the one who has in-depth study of the problems, potential issues which can come up during a process. So what are these? Open climate, listening, discernment, and dialogue. So any problem that comes up, for that either you have understanding and you have a backup plan, or if it's altogether a new situation, how to deal with that at the spur of the moment is strategy that an informed leader will adopt. Then purpose directed and methods. You always have different types of strategies working. Some are purpose directed, direct attention to vision, values, desired outcomes, and use persuasion. You know what is to be achieved. You know the outcome that you need to have. So your strategy is already planned out and you execute it. Sometimes you use rich channels. You use this technique, that technique, you use stories, you need metaphors, you need formal, you need informal. You combine different strategies because you're not really what is going to work better for the situation. Maybe the situation is novice. Maybe you could not really understand the intensity of the situation. So you are applying different methods to coin a new methodology to deal with this new type of situation. However, unless you are informed of these things, you may not be able to do them the way they have to be done. Now, why open the communication channels? Well, an open climate is essential for cascading vision, and cascading is essential because it's natural law of communication. Number one, you get what you talk about. A vision must have ample airtime in an organization. A vision must be shared and practiced by leaders at every opportunity. You all must be very clear whatever is to be achieved. A good communicator knows what outcomes are expected. Once you are aware of your outcomes, your objectives are planned accordingly. When your objectives are planned, you are clear about your methodology. And your methodology is clear, it's easy to move on, proceed, execute, and then expect desired outcomes. So now moving on with communication, from the process of communication to different aspects of communication, we are going to talk about what do we mean by open communication and what are the factors which are involved in open communication. The factors involved are questions and answers. Sometimes this communication is leader-centered, more of talk and more of reception from one party. Sometimes they are follower-centered. However, in both situations, the most active agent is the activity of listening. If you're a good listener, you are making the communication successful. So let's talk about listening. And before we talk about listening, there are 10 keys to effective listening. Now, what are they? Listen actively. Is passive laid back? So, ask questions, paraphrases what is said. What do I mean by active listening? Well, when you are just sitting passively and you are listening is passive listening. However, you are quiet, but you are sharing your gestures with the speaker that you are listening. Nodding head, giving, active eye expressions, sometimes taking part in speaking and paraphrasing what the listener is saying. So speaker is getting a live feedback that whatever is being communicated is communicated. Then find areas of interest. Sometimes, poor listener, they tunes out dry subject. But the active listeners, what do? They look for opportunities. They look for opportunities of new learning, because whatever is being said always has something for you to learn, to grasp. Now, resist distractions. Being a listener, it's very difficult to resist distraction. If I'm sitting in a lecture hall and I'm listening to lecture, after 20 seconds, I'll start thinking, I'm hungry, or I may think, oh, what did she said when she called me yesterday? I'm thinking about my friend. Or maybe I take my mobile out. Oh, what is this Facebook feed? Or what is this Twitter feed? Oh, what is going to happen in the drama that played last evening? So, being human, we get distracted. So, poor listener gets easily distracted. However, the active listener, he or she is a human being too, so distraction is a very normal phenomena, but he or she drives back to the point of discussion, fights distractions, tolerates bad habits, knows how to concentrate. He has built up concentration skills. Now, capitalize on the fact that thought is faster than speech. Well, what is happening that some people, when they are speaking slow, they have slow pace. There are two things, pace and voice. If I'm talking like this, I'm talking about voice. If I'm talking like this, like rapid articulation of words, I'm faster in my pace. So I have to slow down in my pace so my words are articulated clearly. So what happens that poor listeners, when the speaker is a slow-paced speaker, they tend to go into daydream and start thinking about things which they should not be thinking at that time. However, an active listener challenges, anticipates what the speaker is going to say next, which direction he or she is going to take next, keeps on summarizing and thinking about the ideas that he or she just listened to, listens between lines to the tone and the voice, and tries to analyze what is being said or going to be said. Be responsive. The fifth point can be coupled with the very first point. The poor listener is minimally involved, is not involved altogether. You may find always there are few students in a classroom who are sitting on the back benches and they would not like to participate in discussion whatsoever. However, some of them very actively participate. They nod head, they show interest, their eyes are sparkling and they are fully involved in the talk and they give you positive feedback. So these are the active listener which a teacher remembers at well. She would remember these faces always. Being a teacher, I can tell you, I do that. I keep unwantedly, unconsciously, these faces stick to my mind because these are the most active faces in the classroom. Now, sixth thing is judge the content, not delivery. So the poor listener would tunes out if delivery is poor. Well, you don't, however, an active listener would judge contents, skips over delivery errors if there are any, and would still like to take something out of the talk. Well, hold one's fire. That's very important because whenever you are talking, there always are fast interpreters. There always are people who would like to interfere unnecessarily. Poor listeners, they have preconceptions, so they argue unnecessarily. However, the good listeners, the positive listeners, the active listeners, they do not judge until comprehension is complete, the message is complete. Some people are, they cannot hold on their fire, so they pick up the message from in between and will start arguing. Well, I believe what you are saying is not right. This is this, this is this, this is this, blah, 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 blah. Yes, you might be right, but excuse me, wait, please let me finish. You may change your understanding. So give this chance to the poor speaker of finishing his or her message and letting the process complete. And then you are, there to give your point of views if asked for. Then, work at listening. No energy output, faked attention. Well, some people are very bad at pretending. When they are listener, they would show that they are listening, but they are not listening. They are fiddling with mobile underneath, desk or doing something that is unwanted at that time. However, the positive and active listeners, they work hard. They exhibit active body posture and they maintain an eye contact. Well, the last but the least is builds for long-term relationship. Poor listener will resist difficult material in favor of light, recreational material. However, the active listeners, the positive listeners, they do not interrupt or try and sell ideas. They use influences of the message whatsoever lies in the text and would try to pick that up as much as possible. So it is up to you now. In most of the situations, we are not only speaking, we are listening too. Almost in all the situations, we are doing both of the things simultaneously, and they both play significant role in communication. So it's not only being about an effective speaker, it's also being about an effective listener of the message, because unless you listen effectively, you will not be able to speak effectively. Okay, so far we talked about some basics of communication process, and we added some information about the process of communication when we are dealing with the leadership qualities of communication, business communication. And we also added that it's not only being efficient speaker when you are involved in a business communication process. It's 50% of the job. The rest of the 50% is done when you are trained as an effective listener. And for that we discussed 10 very important aspects. With this talk, now we are moving on to the language expansion point of the lecture 2. Lecture number 2 talks about giving advice in situation when you are asked for some advice and you have to give some advice. How do you do that? For example, if you are sitting as a customer support officer, or you are working with a company where your position is of guiding people up how to go about things, how would you do it? Okay, so let's have a very quick drill of giving advice. Here I have a few problems and I have enlisted a few pieces of advice. And I want you to match the right kind of problem with one possible answer as a piece of advice. I read on the advice, I read on the problems, and you pick up the appropriate answer. Well, you might have to pay 2 months' rent. What do you think is the possible answer from list from A to H? Look at the second one. When you move out of a flat, you can have an overdraft. You can use your bank. You need to be registered. Most employers include medical insurance. Using top-ups, you need to check that there is. An advice has been chopped down into two parts and you have to put them together. Let's do it together. Now, before we do it together, I would want you to form your answer. Pause the video here and make sure that when you click it back again, you are done with doing your answers. Now, when you play it again, let's see what are the answers. Well, you might have to pay 2 months' rent as a deposit before you move into a flat. When you move out of a flat, your landlord will check the inventory. Well, you can have an overdraft for free with most banks. Well, you can use your bank card from home to withdraw money from a cash point. You need to be registered with a doctor to get medical treatment. Most employers include medical insurance as part of their employment package. Using top-ups means you don't need to sign a contract for your mobile phone. You need to check that there is broadband access in the area where you live. Here you are. Okay, let's move on to the next screen. Can you see the picture? What do you think is picture about? Well, I want you to take a few minutes and try to describe the picture. How many people you can see in? Looking at the facial expressions, what do you think? Who is the sender? Who is the receiver? Looking at the piece of paper in the female's hand, what do you think? What kind of communication is taking place? Do you think that sender is giving some kind of advice or a message or instruction? What kind of tone he would be keeping with these gestures? And I would want you to frame one small, tiny conversation by writing a dialogue between a sender and the listeners. And this is the communication that is taking place between the one who is sending the message and the listeners who are receiving. And what do you think is the topic of the conversation? That's your homework. Now, after discussing it, I want you to convert this information according to your own settings. The area that you belong to or the country that you live in, I want you to keep the same kind of pieces of advice, but see, are they all applicable to your country where you live in? If they are not, what are the differences? I want you to incorporate those differences and design your dialogue accordingly. And if you want to add some more information and advice, I want you to write that too. In order to use writing and advice, I am giving you some starters. For example, if you want to ask somebody not to do something, you can say, you don't need to. Or, you need to. To do something, you need to. Required to. Or, it's a good idea to start in this way. Or, you have to do it. It's a requirement you're talking about. You would better be aware of the fact. So that is how you tell about you caution people. You must. giving instruction. I want you to look at all these words. You don't need to. You need to. It's a good idea to. You have to. You would better. You must. I want you to incorporate these starters and write sentences and see what kind of messages is communicated. So this was all about our today's talk, where we talked about in the end how to give and share advice. In today's lecture we could not practice our listening drill. That is something we are going to start with our third lecture. In third lecture we will start with a continuation of this expansion activity, a listening script, and then we will start with the talk about our subject area, that is business writing. That was all for today. I hope that you would have enjoyed and learned more about communication skills, business communication, leadership in business communication, the process, and the language activity of the day, that was how to give advice. That was all for lecture 2. I will see you in lecture 3 now. Allah Hafiz.